Métis clan, tribe, and the Carré clan. And I'm from Antler River, which is where London is now located. And my family's from Niagara. So before we start, I just want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Arawandran, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Wendat peoples. Because far before there were prisons and prisoners on this land, there were First Nations approaches to healing that are just as diverse and distinct as the nations themselves. These traditions do not seek to divide our communities and isolate us from each other with fences. Okay, instead they honor autonomy and self-determination and recognize the healing of an individual involves the healing of a community. Right? So today, although First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples are 3.8% of the Canadian population, they comprise nearly 25% of the incarcerated population. And this is shameful. Shame. Aboriginal youth are criminalized and jailed at earlier ages and for longer periods of time than non-Aboriginal youth. Shame. Shame. The Correctional Service of Canada needs to be corrected themselves because they routinely classify more First Nations, Métis, and Inuit inmates as higher security risks, deserving maximum security imprisonment than non-Native inmates. Shame. Indigenous offenders are released later in their sentences, are far less likely to get parole, and are more likely to have their conditional release revoked than non-Native offenders. Shame. Also, I find it interesting that Corrections Canada identifies Aboriginal offenders as having lower reintegration potential. Not only is this discriminatory, but it's like saying that we are not assimilating well enough into this tremendously sick settler society. Well, I have a correction to make, Canada. We will not assimilate because the system is racist. Not only is the incarceration rate 9 times higher for Aboriginal peoples, the gap in the number of Native and non-Native offenders continues to grow. And discrimination is even more pronounced for female Aboriginal offenders. At one point in the history of Canada, all women in solitary confinement were First Nations women. Shame! Shame! And currently, on average, 50% of women in federal maximum security institutions across Canada are Aboriginal. Shame! Shame! So not only are Aboriginal offenders routinely discriminated against by the corrections system, but are less likely to be rehabilitated by their experiences in jail because they are placed in segregation more often than non-Aboriginal offenders, which further reduces their already limited access to culturally relevant programming. This means, while cutting funding for cultural-based services and affordable housing, Stephen Harper and the government wants Aboriginal youth to instead attain their education and live in jail. Shame! Where they will not have access to their community of origin because the colonial government knows that the most effective way to destroy people is to obliterate their understanding of who they are. Offenders should not have to serve their sentences away from family, their community, their friends and elders. How is isolation going to prepare them for release? It isn't. The government is failing to rehabilitate Aboriginal inmates in any effective, culturally sensitive way. And what these stats don't tell us is how many of the offenders had identifiable mental health needs that weren't being because